Welcome everyone to the Atlantic Council Conversations at the IMF Spring Meetings in Washington, D.C. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Rania Al Mashat, the director of the Empower Me Initiative at the Atlantic Council, and I'm very honored to be here with my esteemed guest, Her Excellency Dr. Rania Al Mashat, Egypt's Minister of International Cooperation. Welcome, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much.
So today's discussion will center on Egypt's economic reform agenda, including public spending and debt management, as well as initiatives to empower the private sector and promote strategic sectors in the economy, including renewable energy. Welcome again, Your Excellency. How has the week been going so far?
Well, it's always good to be back in Washington, particularly during spring, but it's always very hectic. I'm very happy to be here with you at the Atlantic Council and be talking about what Egypt is going through, particularly with its green transition.
Absolutely. We're very, very honored to have you today. So, Your Excellency, Egypt's economy has endured a severe economic crisis, as we all know, marked by macroeconomic imbalances, mounting public debt, and foreign currency shortages. And the government has recently implemented changes to address this crisis and restore economic sustainability. Could you offer us a detailed overview of the government's reform strategy and what are the key goals and expectations?
The past 2 months particularly have been very important, and I want to, split my discussion into macroeconomic stabilization, which is very, very key, and it's reinforcing when it comes to structural reforms. Mm-hmm. So all countries in the world have been hit, particularly emerging markets, with the cost of capital, the tightening that's happening in the developed world, geopolitical tensions everywhere. There was just the article published by Larry Summers and saying about capital outflows from emerging and developing economies into developed economies, either through interest rate repayments or actually FDI making its way outside of emerging markets. So these are real time and real challenges that are facing emerging economies. In the case of Egypt, macroeconomic stabilization through what we saw since March 6th, and the Deputy Governor was with you before, there has been a move to a flexible exchange rate, there has been fiscal consolidation, there has been an IMF program finalized with 2 reviews already behind us. But what we are working on now, and this is happening with all the other partners that the Ministry of International Cooperation is responsible for, is taking a deeper dive into the structural reform program. And here I want everybody to remember that our structural reforms are anchored on 3 key pillars. The first one is continuing on macro fiscal stabilization. The second has to do with improving the business environment and increasing the economy's competitiveness. And the third has to do with supporting the green transition. And when we talk about structural reforms, you look at institutional or regulatory changes that need to take place, either through changing laws, introducing incentives, trying to set up intergovernmental modalities that ease the way certain aspects are going to be implemented. As Egypt is putting all of this together and implementing these very important reforms, we have the relationship with other MDBs and other development partners continuing. So for instance, with the World Bank, we are finalizing our development policy financing program. And this is going to be budget support that supports this reform package, if you will. Also with our European colleagues, there is a macro financial agreement, which we are finalizing also before end of June, which supports this reform program. And what is very important, and this is a concept that you will hear throughout this week, these programs have to be country-led, they have to be homegrown, so that their implementation is one that does not, face the issues related to political economy. And that's why each and every stabilization program with the structural reforms is always twinned with social protection or social safety nets to mitigate the implications of many of the tough decisions on citizens.
Absolutely. That's very important to hear. And while you're discussing relations with other stakeholders, I know that over the past few months, the Egyptian government has welcomed significant influx of FDI grants and loans from partners like the UAE through FDI or through grants and loans from the EU and IMF. How is the government leveraging these resources to support economic growth? And what strategies are in place to ensure transparency and accountability in their allocation and utilization?
So let me talk about the file that we're responsible for in the ministry, and that has to do with all development partners with the exception of the IMF. The ability to tap on additional concessional finance can only happen if you have a long-standing relationship which is built on transparency and trust. And this is what we, each and every dollar that comes for concessional finance, be it to support a project or budget support, is accounted for. It has very extensive procedures, both with the partner as well as internally. And when there's a partnership, two have to speak to and account for what is being dispersed and where it's being implemented. So on average, and these are numbers that are substantiated with data, on average, at any point in time, our current portfolio with all our development partners, this is not the FDI, this is the concessional grants and concessional finance, is around $26 billion at any point in time.
Even during the crisis?
It has not, and this is again a very important aspect, and thank you for mentioning this. You know, it's concessional finance is one of the alternatives of finance for any country. When we look at the World Bank and its evolution, we look at the African Development Bank, when we look at EBRD, IFC, these are resources which are availed, but they are scarce resources, and therefore countries find it. You know, we compete for these very scarce resources. So for us to be able, in the past 4 years, since the pandemic, to mobilize an additional $40 billion, $10 billion for the private sector, concessional finance, this speaks very well to the dynamics of what we have in terms of articulating projects or being able to move the green agenda. So this has continued. It did not at all halt. On the contrary, we have been able to leverage, for instance, climate finance is so important. We put together a country platform, the Nexus of Water, Food and Energy, known as the NWEFI program, which has actually drawn in a lot of FDI, particularly on the renewable and most recently on green hydrogen, through concessional finance, through grants, and also we have a debt swap with Germany for mitigation. So we have been able to leverage each and every concessional finance pocket, but all of this is in line with national strategies. It's very much homegrown. So this is, why am I mentioning these numbers? 26 billion portfolio at any point in time means that the disbursements per year are on net positive, bringing into the balance of payments close to 2.5 billion. Why is this type of financing important? It's long term. There's a long grace period, on average 6 years, and you pay back over a long period of time, and the interest rates, of course, are below market. So this is it's really developmental in nature, and this is what everyone here in Washington, given the call for more coordination between MDBs or additional capital for the World Bank and others to be able to do such kinds of developmental projects in countries to push them and push the potential of the economy. So most recently, what has happened, and this is something that we are pushing for, and it's good that the audience knows this, the structural reforms, which are based on the 3 pillars I mentioned, we are able to collate budget support in order to help us with our efforts to implement these. And the different policies under each of the pillars is meant to increase the potential of the economy and also meant to be able to draw in more private sector and private sector that can access the concessional finance. And this is something very important. Not everybody knows that a major part of the concessional finance with the IFIs goes to the private sector, and it goes to the private sector either as increasing equity or concessional cheap loans, or also through credit lines in the banks. So when we look at our relationship with the EU, the strategic and comprehensive relationship, which was announced on March 17th, part of the financial package there includes 1.8 billion investment guarantees for companies to invest in the country. So this is a very good opportunity, particularly in sectors related to renewable, green hydrogen, sustainable in the ports, sustainable transport, and so forth. And the second part includes macro-financial arrangements, which is very similar to the World Bank's development policy financing, the DPFs, which are related to structural reforms. So all of this is supposed to push in a positive direction to be able to bring in the FDI that we're looking for.
But beside the green energy sector, what are the strategic sectors that the government is trying to promote right now, and what other types of incentives beside access to finance are you trying to offer to investors and private sector actors?
So if we take a look at and currently there's an industrial policy strategy that's being finalized, and we're also doing it with our colleagues from the World Bank. Also, there's the Supreme Council for Investment, which was launched last year. And there's an FDI strategy, which is also going to be announced sometime soon. But if we're, solar, wind, green hydrogen, because of the energy, which is definitely important, also for partners where we can, across the Mediterranean. Tourism is another very important sector, given our comparative advantage. It has been contributing positively both to the BOP as well as to economic growth. And the employment multiplier for the tourism sector is 1 to 4. So each and every direct job that is produced or generated, there's an additional 4 indirect jobs that are generated. Very, very important at this juncture. So those would be, some of the low-hanging fruits, if you will. But also food security, a lot in terms of food processing. Our exports of food exports have been quite sizable over the past years, and this is given the additional technology introduced in some of the production that takes place. So, we're very diversified. We're trying to push in the different areas, and as I go back, the structural reforms or the policy changes are supposed to support, in many instances, the competition there. For example, one of the measures that were taken recently for the first time, a B2B on energy to facilitate that. The second, for instance, is the legislations related to the executive regulation related to competition law, small claims law to ease the disputes that take place on some measures. So structural reforms are always looking a little bit deeper into what's happening or what needs to change with respect to legislation or procedures and so forth to increase the competition and bring in the private sector.
And reforms usually come at a cost. One of the costs is rising inflation, as you well know, and they can have adverse effects on vulnerable populations. Egypt poverty rates are a little close to 30%, so I'm sure the government now has a plan to strengthen safety net programs to sort of protect this portion of the society. What has the government done so far?
So when I talk about relationship with the MDBs, it's very important because you can design programs which are considered flagship. And here in 2015, we launched our Takaful and Karama, which is one of the biggest social protection programs globally. So that was launched in 2015. When COVID happened, we could scale it to face the crisis. And now we did a third program for Takaful and Karama to exactly address some of the vulnerable, the portions of society which would be affected in order to alleviate the pressure from the different reforms. So this is also an ongoing process.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It has been a pleasure to have you with us today, and we wish you all the best in this coming week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.